Hi beautiful people! Today we're going to talk about a channel called Mrs. Midwest. I became aware of Kate through my bae, Mr. Atheist, and have since watched perspectives from Jaclyn Glenn and been asked via DMs to please comment. This should be interesting because Mr. Atheist said,
many of you had messaged me, hey, this person, you need to cover this person because they're way worse than Girl Defined, and I thought, no way. I was wrong. I'm sorry. She's worse.
While Jaclyn says,
I did come to the conclusion that she is nowhere near as bad as Girl Defined.
And then there's my perspective. In this video, you'll sometimes find me standing alongside these two atheists that I adore, but at other times, actually finding myself agreeing with Mrs. Midwest. First and foremost, I am with Jaclyn on this.
She is nowhere near as bad as Girl Defined.
Sorry, I love you, Jimmy. But I do see Mrs. Midwest's messages less harmful than Girl Defined. I hold this opinion because I have heard many times, no matter how sugar-coated, on both Girl Defined and especially on Paul and Morgan's channel, this instilled fear of the other or the unsaved. Those two channels, while saying they offer opinions on their perspectives, often discourage people from stepping outside of their evangelical bubbles and actually listening to and considering other people's perspectives and experiences. I won't presume to know this of Girl Defined or of Paul and Morgan, but when I was being raised in evangelicalism, I was often taught to be afraid of other people. That the presence of friends that had diversity of thought or perspective or religion actually posed a danger to me and my salvation, like I could be drugged down into the den of wolves. Whereas Mrs. Midwest says,
don't just assume because a woman is a feminist that she is a bad friend or a bad person. I have a lot of friends who are feminists. These people are important to me, they love me, they know my traditional beliefs. Don't feel like you need to be aggressive or harp on people who are different than you. Continue to be friends with good people, regardless of their beliefs.
And I agree with this wholeheartedly. I've always been drawn to wild people and been curious about diverse thoughts and perspectives, but at church specifically, this innate curiosity in me was often chastised. Thank God I never listened to my evangelical leaders on this because I felt I had biblical backing to the way I was living. I was looking at who Jesus hung out with and thought, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything wrong. And yes, there is wisdom in hanging out with people that share the same perspective as you because it can nourish you and cultivate more confidence in your faith and your spirituality. Just having people to pray with is an enormous blessing in my life. But my life has always been richer for having both. People that I'm aligned with and I agree with, and people that really challenge me, people that I even outright disagree with. The interesting thing is, I don't know how Mrs. Midwest would feel about God is Gray, but the impact of our channels seems to be similar.
All these women came out of the woodwork and they were saying, I'm so happy you are talking about these things because I believe it, but I'm too scared.
It seems to me that people that were struggling to find a community have found that in each of our channels. And when it comes to fear, in this next clip, if you replace feminism with Jesus, Paul, and evangelicalism, we actually have a similar objective with our channels.
And I think that's really sad because I don't think that's what feminists intended, was to make women feel marginalized and tiny in what they wanted in life, but it kind of has had that adverse effect. Don't feast on feminist messages. Take them in moderation, evaluate them, discern the truth, and then you will begin to create your own beliefs in this area.
She is saying to not blindly follow what you've been told, which is the opposite of other YouTubers who say the way they've been taught to interpret the Bible is the only true way to Jesus. That said, on the potentially negative side, Mrs. Midwest is actively following a lot of those principles that on this channel I address as being harmful. So this is where the balance comes in. Is Kate's channel edifying or horrifying? My answer is a little bit of both. So let's start with something that makes Kate very relatable to me. And this is exactly what will have Mr. Atheist affectionately face-palming on my behalf. And that is Mrs. Midwest's explanation that our shared faith does not come from logic or provable facts. We are Christians because Jesus deeply resonates and we love him. It is emotional.
In our modern world, there's this narrative that you're unintelligent
if you have a religion. That religion is to assuage the stupid mind or the overly emotional person. And I'm sure I do myself no favors in this video by showing you my heavy emotion behind my faith, but to ignore that would be to deny the emotional impact my faith has made on my life.
On the flip side of this, Mrs. Midwest, yes, some people do think we are silly or whimsical for believing that a virgin gave birth to the Son of Man and that he died for our sins. We might be teased for that. But most people I know, myself included, think that Christians show a lack of intelligence, not in our heartfelt desire and love for God, but because of our unwillingness to accept the reality of climate change, to believe in science, or when they spread misinformation, lies, and scare tactics around women's health. These are things that cause harm to not only individuals, but the planet as a whole. This is why people end up hating on Christians. It is our willful ignorance that drives people insane and causes the need for them to speak out against us. When Christians cause harm, they need to be called out. I don't know where Kate stands on these issues, but in this clip, she expresses her faith as a personal journey, something that we should nurture in ourselves and in our loved ones, regardless of what they believe. Something I agree with her on.
I don't think that my faith is about being perfect or being better than everybody else. It's merely a personal journey. It's peace and balance in the way we live our life. It's patience with ourselves and other people. It's kindness. Kindness to do the right thing. Kindness to yourself to be healthy. Kindness to yourself to nurture yourself. It's kindness to the world.
The question I have from here is, Kate, when it comes to that nurturing, that love, that desire to do no harm, does that extend to all people? And I mean all people of all nations, of all genders, of all orientations, of all religions, or lack thereof. Because this is what reads to me as naive.
And I know in current year, it's nerdy and weird and lame to be a Christian.
Again, our society, the liberals, however we want to label each other, do not take issue with Christianity because it's nerdy. It's because our religion, historically and currently, imposes our values on the marginalized people of society, the ones we are meant to be extending love and grace to, like Jimmy.
I'm a member of the queer community, and I have seen nothing but Christians forcing their beliefs on me.
We have heard one side of an argument pretty loudly for a lot of years now.
Yeah, you're right. We have been hearing that for a long time. You're talking about the Christian worldview, right? Because that's why it was only until a couple years ago we were finally able to get gay marriage passed. You're talking about how they still have their hands in what kind of sex education happens in schools.
Christianity has done harm through decades, through centuries, with our political power. Please watch Jimmy's video for a more in-depth look on this. And yet, simultaneously, I've seen Christians playing the victim, saying that this phantom enemy called culture or society is out to tear away our religious freedom.
Sometimes it can feel like every other group of people other than religious traditional people can have their beliefs, and they can criticize you, and they can disagree with you, and they can demand that you fall into line with their beliefs.
This statement is absurd. Evangelicals often vote to strip others of their rights. We've argued to keep the 10 Commandments in courthouses, to force people to say Merry Christmas, to not allow trans people in the military, and to determine who is allowed and not allowed to get married. Now, to be clear, in this upcoming clip, I know that Kate is talking about leading a feminine life, and how sometimes in our society, women are shamed for the desire to be homemakers or to be stay-at-home moms. I agree that happens, and we'll get into that more deeply in a second. But for now, I'm pulling these clips to show a correlation. Mrs. Midwest says that shame is useful for course correcting when people are doing harm. And though I prefer the word conviction, I completely agree. She finds it unfair that people don't adopt the mentality of live and let live when a woman desires to be a housewife, because ultimately she is causing zero harm to other people. But I would add to that many Christians refuse to adopt the mentality of live and let live when it comes to LGBTQ people, a group that again is causing absolutely no harm to others. So we agree here if she as a Christian concedes that the word feminine and LGBTQ+ can be interchangeable in this statement.
It's good for people to feel shame if that shame causes them to course correct their lifestyle and perhaps stop committing crimes, stop stealing, stop hurting children, stop abusing. That shame does not need to be applied to people who are living out a feminine
feminine life.
So again, I do think this channel is less damaging because she doesn't go into these political issues or talk about LGBTQ being a sin. However, there is a major point that I do take issue with, and that is her gender stereotyping. Mrs. Midwest goes out of her way to assure us that her channel is made specifically to encourage women who want to be housewives, who want to cultivate that sort of lifestyle. And that is perfectly fine. If all of her videos were about how to be a housewife, how she takes care of her house, how she loves on her husband, how she is planning her fertility, etc., we wouldn't even be talking about this. But there are videos where she makes sweeping statements about gender.
The fact is, we are not actually representing femininity when women take on these roles. In fact, it's merely women displaying masculinity, more masculinity.
And that has been harmful to not only individuals, but our society as a whole. Because a lot of people, myself included, do not perfectly fit into that binary. A lot of Christians don't perfectly fit into that binary, and we've been told that we have to be lovers of Christ. That has been brainwashing and disheartening for many believers of all genders. I'm with Jaclyn when she says,
And it is frustrating to hear her constantly use masculinity as a descriptor for women who happen to be strong in certain roles or successful or ambitious. Those things are not reserved for men. And being caring and loving and nurturing and empathetic are not things reserved for women.
I personally see masculinity and femininity on a scale, much like the Kinsey scale is for sexuality. I, for example, am a heterosexual cisgender woman in a relationship with a man. I naturally possess stereotypically feminine traits. I love frilly, glittery clothing and dressing up. I love rom-coms, and I feel really sexy when I have the whole house clean and I am cooking a meal for my man. However, I also moved to LA when I was 19 years old and fully took care of myself. If something in my house broke or my car broke down, I had to take care of that. And I have never, ever, even when I was married, had a man pay my rent or my bills. So this critique of Mrs. Midwest is not that she is using her platform to encourage women who desire to be homemakers, but more so that I, as an objective viewer, feel that sometimes she's implying any of my stereotypically masculine traits make me less feminine, or are somehow me embracing needing to be a man, or society's call for me to be more masculine. But like I said, it's a scale. Sometimes I am paying the bills and sometimes I'm cooking dinner, and neither of them come to me because I feel pressure from either church, society, external forces. They are just naturally me, and all of us will naturally fall somewhere on that scale regardless of your gender. And that brings me to the last two things that rub me the wrong way, but I promise right afterwards we're gonna get back into more positivity. One, I'd encourage you to watch Jaclyn Glenn's pair of videos on Mrs. Midwest.
The biggest problem with Mrs. Midwest is the misinformation that she propagates on her channel.
Misinformation becomes really dangerous when it supports this us versus them mentality. Mrs. Midwest sometimes buys into and perpetuates this fallacy that there's a greater conspiracy to destroy femininity.
They told us that it was going to be incredible. They told us it would be liberating. They told us it was the secret to happiness. And what did they do?
Who told anybody that?
Who? This made me laugh because in this particular video, Mrs. Midwest speaks a lot about they, the people lying to us, and I was thinking the whole time, who are these people? I don't want her believing or telling others that society or they are out to get her. Ironically, on both our YouTubes, we are addressing people that have not felt comfortable in the way God made them, that have felt pressures externally to change who they are or to not really embrace who they know they were made to be. But the majority of people all over have a complicated journey coming into who they are. There are always naysayers in people's lives. This is not unique to femininity or Christianity or society. Going through marriage and a divorce and the deconstruction and reconstruction of my faith caused a lot of people to doubt me as a Christian, and a lot of people still do. Similarly, I'm sure it's a struggle to be a stay-at-home wife and have to hear other people's opinions on that. But we all have to stay strong and live as we're called to. Just do your thing. So let's end on some positivity. This video is one I found powerful and amazing. In evangelicalism, the balance between masculine and feminine is often destroyed by the power of patriarchy and fear. You see this massive perversion in the twisted rhetoric of the transformed housewife or biblical gender roles. This abuse of power and domination by the masculine does not honor God or our faith. In the creation story in Genesis, in the original translation, the pronoun for the creator was neither masculine or feminine, but both. God intended to create with masculine and feminine energy combined. In their purest forms, both energies are crucial. And in this video, Mrs. Midwest offers a healthy, self-respecting, God-honoring approach to femininity. While Dale Partridge, John MacArthur, Transform Wife, and your local pastor, whoever, say, women, submit, even at the cost of your own desires and your own joy.
And is your flesh going to hate it as a woman?
Absolutely.
Men make the decisions. Women are made to serve.
The world is trying to muddy your wife's brain up with lies.
I don't know. My brain is broken.
Mrs. Midwest says to thrive as a woman is to be intelligent, is to be empowered by self-care.
You need to be aware of your needs and expressing those needs in an honest way. Being feminine doesn't mean constantly parroting the phrase, oh, whatever you want, sweetheart, or oh, I'm fine with that, if you're not.
Holding boundaries and creating mutually edifying relationships.
I used to be a very large people pleaser in my relationships. Then I realized those relationships quickly turned very poisonous and toxic and unhealthy because one person held all the power and I was bowing down to them.
And while dark people use Ephesians 5:22 to justify manipulation and spousal abuse, Mrs. Midwest says,
it is next to impossible to thrive as a feminine woman in an environment where you're being abused, or hurt, or exposed to violence even. So always putting other people first, always being a people pleaser is not feminine.
And again, this video was something I loved and I would encourage you guys to watch. Being that I'm a very soon-to-be mom, it was encouraging to remember nurturing and boundaries and different things that are going to be important as I move into this role of mother. I'm reminded to co-create with my partner and with my son and yet still leave space for my own spiritual growth and needs. In conclusion, yes, there are a few videos that I hope Kate will reconsider, especially through the critiques of Jimmy and Jaclyn. But overall, I see Mrs. Midwest's channel growing and thriving, and I hope she will continue to help women set boundaries, take care of themselves, and really embrace the role that they believe they were made to have, if that is what they want. And I also pray that she truly allows others to live and let live. Again, I don't know her political stance, I don't know her stance on LGBTQ, but if she really holds that, if she really believes everyone is deserving of honor and their own life path, then I wish nothing but the best for her and her channel. And that's it. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, donate to my Patreon or Venmo if you can. I love you guys. God bless.